I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are Velocities in Music. And just before we get started, I want to remind everybody that, we come from the channels of YouTube. We come from the channels of YouTube. In fact, most of you listening to us right now are probably listening via YouTube. And that's awesome. We're going to continue. I want you guys to know that Tom and I are going to continue to post our podcast version of Velocities in Music on YouTube for as long as we're going to do this for probably ever, right?
Yeah.
Just keep posting it to YouTube. However, we do now have a podcast app, and we're hosting our podcast, and it's being distributed to iTunes and other various Android apps and devices. So you can just subscribe to us via your favorite podcast app, and you will automatically down Velocities and Music podcast to your phone, which is the coolest thing in the world. Or any other device that you use to listen to podcasts. So please do that for us. It's a big way to support Velocities in Music. It's a way for us to easily distribute content to you and faster, since we can distribute the audio file a lot faster than having to do the extra work to make it a video file and then load it to YouTube, which we will still do. You'll probably get the podcast version first.
Right.
So on to the music. So Tom and I, in this podcast form of Velocities in Music, Tom, we haven't really gotten into any real new music at all since we started the podcast.
No, not too much, but it's not like we haven't been listening to it. It's out there.
And a lot of new music comes out. In fact, it's an overwhelming amount of new music comes out every single month. And we still it's not, I don't think it's possible for someone to listen to every album that comes out every year.
right.
But we're going to get close. And we're going to, as albums release usually every Tuesday, but for some reason this last Friday, September 25th, a ton of albums came out.
Yeah, big music day.
I have no idea why either.
What the hell?
It doesn't make any sense. But as new music is released every week, Tom and I keep this running Google Doc of these albums that we want to check out and give a listen or two to, and really kind of not do a full review on, but dissect and just give our thoughts on, really, so we can just stay current with all the music that's coming out. And now, for the purpose of the podcast, what we'd like to do is do a month-end summary. This is something new. We haven't done this before. We're breaking away from music reviews and jumping into a month-end summary, where we kind of just give you guys a list of the albums that we listened to over the course of the month and what our initial impressions were. Not a full-fledged review, definitely not going to do scores. What our purpose is here is to start a conversation and really give you guys recommendations to what Tom and myself like. So in Velocities in Music, I felt like we were always reviewing and then had to say if something was good or bad, and I always felt kind of wishy-washy on a lot of albums,
because you don't want to nail it down. You don't want to make it too concrete. It's easier to just talk about it. And
really, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of just good music that's released, and trying to decide what level of good it is, it gets really taxing after a while. And I know that for my purposes, I would prefer just have the conversation. What does this album that was just released, what does it bring to the table? So that's what we're going to attempt to do today for you. We're going to start, Tom and I are going to just start jumping into albums. We'll call the album out, and then we'll start just a brief dialogue between us and discuss that album, and then move on to the next. And hopefully we'll get through, a good chunk here. I think we have 20 or 25 we want to get through kind of rapid fire. So without further ado, let's get started. September 2015.
September 2015, we're going to start with Bring Me the Horizons, That's the Spirit. This was a really interesting album from a band that I actually had not really had much experience with, but after looking into them, they've been on kind of the hardcore scene throughout the 2000s. And I gotta say, while this one's been really getting rave reviews and some major hype, I really was not a big fan of it. For me, it felt like kind of that blend of like pop and hardcore or hard rock, that kind of like 30 Seconds to Mars or like Skillet kind of radio rock that I'm like, just decide whether you want to be a hard rock band or whether you want to be some kind of like pop band. I don't know. It treaded that line for me, and I didn't feel like it really succeeded in either category.
I started listening to this album earlier this week, and when I was listening to it, I realized that one of the things that these guys bring to the table is that they're trying to add a lot of pop atmosphere to a natural hardcore or pop punk song. and it gives it a freshness that I think that genre desperately needs.
Yeah, that's fair.
So initially I really liked it. I remember chatting you saying, "Hey, you got to check this album out. It's kind of cool. It has a lot of intensity and stuff." The problem is that they've just fallen that A-B song structure. I mean, it is just verse chorus throughout the entire album. By the end of the album, the gimmick has worn off,
right?
And it starts to get a little monotonous.
And I think it's the kind of thing where that might work on a track by track basis. If you
sure.
just hear one of these tracks, it'll probably catch your attention.
Right.
But yeah, then you put it all together in an album, and I just kind of felt like, man, I don't really know what kind of edge these guys are going for.
Yeah.
And that kind of mixed message in the style. Not that I'm against style blending and genre fusion or anything like that, but it just, I don't know. For me, it didn't really do it.
Right. So, we're a little bit cooler on this than the general consensus out there. So this is an album that if you're into that genre, that kind of hardcore pop punk genre, if you're into that genre, this is definitely one you should check out. Just bear in mind some of the things Tom said and let us know if you agree.
Next up, we got Chvrches' Every Open Eye. This has been a much anticipated album because Chvrches' debut, The Bones of What You Believe, was really big, and it was one that I know at first I was really not enjoying, and by the time we reviewed it and I listened to it several times, man, I mean, you cannot dig the style, and that's fine, but their songwriting is just good.
I still love that album. I can't get the track Recover. I still get it in my head all the time.
Oh, there are several tracks from that album that were standouts, and from what I've heard, Every Open Eye, I think it's going to grow on me to that point. Now, this is a very new one, so we haven't had too much time with it.
Yeah.
But definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I've gotten a listen and a half in on this one, and I got to say, I was just initially very impressed. A lot of really great songwriting, a lot of fluid electronic melodies, and just, a lot of energy, too. And what this group brings to the table, I think, is quite special. This is a group that I'm very interested in where they go. I mean, it sounds like this album, Every Open Eye, is gonna be very good. I want to give it a few more listens before I really give it that stamp of like, this is awesome, one of the best albums of the year, but it certainly seems to have that potential.
Right. I will say that in terms of style, it is pretty similar to their debut.
It very much is. It's almost like a maturation.
Right.
At times.
Right, exactly. Like they're just kind of trying to solidify what they had started.
Yeah.
And I'll be eager to see where they go next.
Absolutely.
Because this is a genre that I think, if they keep doing the same thing, it might get a little stale. But it doesn't take much to mix it up.
Right.
I would even compare it a little bit to, really contrast actually to Phantogram's move from Eyelid Movies to Voices, which are completely different albums when you listen to them stylistically.
Sure.
And I'd kind of like to see Chvrches do something like that, but at the same time, I'm not disappointed at all with this new one.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Julia Holter's Have You in My Wilderness. This album came out yesterday, September 25th. Yep. And, Julia Holter's an artist that we didn't discover until 2013 when we were doing our album reviews. We reviewed Loud City Song, and I remember really liking that record. Very
unique, a very artsy take on kind of contemporary female singer-songwriter pop music.
Yeah.
It's... I don't really know how else to describe it,
right.
But the instrumentation, it's very lush, very smooth arrangements. The production really matches it well. It's the kind of thing where it's not overly poppy and shiny, but at the same time, I think if it was any more kind of indie sounding, then it would actually take away from just the polish that she has in her songwriting.
That's a very good point. And the whole presentation seems to be built around her silky smooth vocals, which is certainly true in Have You in My Wilderness, and one thing I noticed about this album is that where the previous album was quite dark in mood, this album is much brighter. It has a much more optimistic tone to it. There's a lot more of a beat structure to a lot of these. A lot of these songs actually have percussion in them.
More melody focused also, whereas
absolutely.
Loud City Song kind of meandered into kind of that artistic, I wanted to say wilderness, and I was like, well, this one's the one with the wilderness.
Yeah, and I gotta call out the track Every Time Boots because it mentions rattlesnakes several times, and it gets me
terrifying to you.
It gets me a little terrified. So but initially, other than that, I think it's a really positive record and one that I'm definitely going to come back to.
Absolutely, you'll just cringe every time they mention snakes.
You know it.
Another one that came out yesterday was Kurt Weill's newest one, Believe I'm Going Down, coming a couple years off of Waking on the Pretty Days, and then before that, a couple of years, Smoke Ring for My Halo. I mean, this guy has really dominated the last 5 years or so. He's a great songwriter, great performer. I think the key about Kurt Weill is he's really just found his niche in this kind of hazy, dreamy, kind of folk, kind of like Bob Dylan in the clouds kind of sound. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but what I'm really impressed by on Believe I'm Going Down is I feel like he's still continuing just that solid top-notch songwriting.
Yep.
His melodies are good. This one's a little bit drier in the acoustic guitar, which I think brings it down to earth a little bit more.
Yep.
But I mean, he's just a very endearing personality to listen to.
Yeah, there are several tracks on Believe I'm Going Down that seem to have a more driving beat, but he balances that out with still having a lot of like the mellow finger-picked guitar tracks too, which I think that dichotomy really gives the record a lot of appeal. There's also a track on here where, and I'm sure he's had piano and tracks before, but just in listening to this, it caught me off guard because it was such a different change. But there's actually a track on here that removes the acoustic guitar and is basically piano, bass, and drums, which is a neat sound for him, and it gives the album a little bit of edge at that point. And when it was kind of getting, to doing the same thing over and over again, give it a little variety. So that was neat.
Yeah, definitely a recommended listen.
Absolutely. Yesterday, another album came out that Tom and I have been anticipating for a couple years now, the third record by Youth Lagoon, Savage Hills Ballroom. Youth Lagoon is an artist that, does these really expansive pop builder tracks. And then a couple years ago, they came out with an album, Wondrous Bughouse. And Tom and I really liked that record. Had a number of just very great songs on it, but the album as a whole really flowed well and was just very high quality. So Savage Hills Ballroom comes out, and Tom and I really didn't know what to expect, right? Are we going to see another Wondrous Bughouse? Are we going to go back to the first album where you have a lot of the builders? Where are they going to go in a completely new direction? And the new direction is definitely where they went.
It is. I got to say, I'm impressed with Youth Lagoon's ambition, just because from Year of Hibernation to Wondrous Bughouse to Savage Hills Ballroom, I mean, really the only common thread is Trevor Powers' just kind of signature croak of a vocal.
Yes.
And he makes that signature fit with all these different kinds of instrumental palettes that he's using. And this newest one, even at times incorporates just subtle hints of even like dubstep and industrial, which sounds like it's not going to work, but he really incorporates it well. This is another one where, he really uses a good dynamic contrast between the really stripped down pieces of the album, the kind of simplistic, maybe even just piano driven things, to the larger, more expansive pop arrangements. But this one, I just, once again, was impressed by both the songwriting and by the maturation of sound.
And this is definitely much more of a studio crafted album. It doesn't feel like the arrangements don't feel as full. But not in a bad way. It's more just focused, right?
It's more just that they're not oversaturated.
Yep.
There's some space between the things that are happening at any given moment, but I think that that's a good thing.
And especially compared to Wondrous Bughouse, which is such a big sound throughout.
Definitely.
It's big and very lush, indie songwriting, where this is much more condensed. So very interesting change and shift in sound.
Next up, we've got Battles La-Di Da-Di. I don't know if that's like a Snoop Dogg and Slick Rick reference or what, but
I hope so. I really hope it is.
Well, there's nothing hip-hop about this album at all. It's, classic Battles, progressive rock, but I will say that the key difference for me on this one is, well, first off, much more absence of vocals. I mean, there were some vocals on both Mirrored and Gloss Drop, but I felt like this one had a bit less of a driving rock sound behind it. It's still kind of the interesting math rock, complex polyrhythms.
A little more twinkly.
Right, yeah, a little more glittery, a little more polished in the high end, but still just a lot of fun to listen to. I mean, these guys, they're expert musicians. It's just kind of about that return quality for me. While I enjoyed listening to this the first time, if I'm going to listen to Battles, I'm probably more likely to come back to one of their first two records.
Fair.
Up next, we've got David Gilmour's Rattle That Lock. Solo record from David Gilmour, of course, from Pink Floyd.
I think real quick we should take a break and review all of Pink Floyd's back catalog.
Right. Yeah, we'll just take approximately 9 hours and do that, and then come back to this. Right,
no big deal. Right?
It's a necessary precursor.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about David Gilmour,
we have to, right? Yeah. But it is kind of funny coming off of Pink Floyd's Endless River from into 2014, and now we've got a David Gilmour solo record. And I gotta say, while the songwriting was not terrible on this album, I it wasn't overly engaging or exciting, and more than anything, I really just didn't like the production. The way that he's presenting these songs to me feels like he's stuck in the 1980s Pink Floyd mindset. There's this just kind of like cheap, fake grandeur to all the songs that, for me, just didn't really sell it.
It lacks authenticity.
Right, it definitely does. And the guy's still a genius. That guitar tone, it's still in there. But this isn't one that I'm likely to come back to. It's more just an obligatory listen because it's freaking David Gilmour. I mean, come on. But I wasn't overly impressed.
Earlier this month, a band called Fidlar came out with their album 2. I had to look up what style Fidlar is classified in, and it's the Resurgence Skate Punk. Resurgence Skate Punk. What the hell does that mean? So
whatever you want it to mean.
And I'll be honest, I've never listened to Fidlar before, but I was very impressed by 2. Just an album with a ton of energy, which I was initially intrigued by that. But the interesting thing is they throw a lot of pop hooks in there that really keep the song fresh and really memorable. It gets you dancing to it, and the album really flows very well. It's an album that you can put on, really just kick back and enjoy, and it brings a very fun vibe to whatever you're doing. One thing I will say that I was very intrigued by this album is the vocals, almost industrial level, like Brand New on their album Daisy, just screaming on top of this like kind of like Black Keys or the White Stripes or something like that. So that amalgamation of sound I found just to be very interesting and highly addictive.
Yeah, you can kind of picture them just playing it in their dirty garage to all their friends standing in their driveway, and it just works.
Yeah. Another album that came out earlier this month was All Yours by a band called Widowspeak. Widowspeak is I call them an indie pop, indie rock, but very, very, very mellow, right? It's kind of, they're an indie band, but they pretty much do singer-songwriter. We reviewed their album Almanac in 2013, and we gave it a decent score, but probably not something that we were super jazzed up about. It was just kind of lacked the energy and songwriting prowess to really bring us in, to really get us interested in the album and make us come back to it.
Their music is very inoffensive. It's easy to listen to. It's not bad to listen to, but it doesn't really pull you in.
And that is absolutely true of All Yours. After one listen, I really felt like this album was just devoid of energy. Still, the songwriting's decent. The female vocals are excellent, but not something that I'm ever going to get attached to. So this album's probably not one that I would return to, but if you're into this style, that indie folk style, this is definitely an album that I would recommend you check out. This is an artist that does very high quality work. It's just not necessarily something that's going to blow my mind in terms of trying to find the best album of 2015.
Next up, we've got The Deer Hunter with Act 4, Rebirth in Reprise.
What is this, Coheed and Cambria?
Well, that's what I was going to say, man. You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, I don't know how many acts they're going to come up with, The Deer Hunter, but I really like this album. I was very impressed by the instrumentation, a lot of varied instrumentals in here, very polished production. It's indie in presentation and in idea, in concept, but it's just got this sheen on it where everything sounds so clean and so crystal clear. It actually reminded me a little bit, Jake, of a band that you got me into, that you've been into a lot recently, and that's Radical Face.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. Yeah, one thing about Act 4 that I really liked was just the diverse songwriting and the instrumental palette. A lot of variety there, which is something that I always am initially intrigued by, but I will say it takes good songwriting. Like, you can have a really diverse instrumental palette, production palette, do all the bells and whistles you want, but if you don't have good songwriting, your sound really doesn't take you that far.
Right, at that point, it's just fluff.
Well,
it's just no substance.
And I feel like Act 4 does accomplish good songwriting.
Oh, it definitely does.
A lot of really great hooks in these songs. I found myself really getting attached to these songs, getting them stuck in my head. So this is an album I'm definitely coming back to.
I will say I'm going to have to come back to it because it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
Like you can't really, I feel, get a full sense of this album in just one or even two listens. It's a longer one. It's very complex. So it definitely is going to be drawing me back in.
Definitely.
Next up, we've got Lana Del Rey's Honeymoon, another very new one. It was very nice of Lana Del Rey to invite us listeners on her honeymoon.
That is very nice.
But I feel kind of bad though, because it's got to be the most boringest honeymoon of all time.
It like rained the entire time.
Right.
We were inside. We were playing Sorry.
That's just such a miserable picture.
Drinking milk.
So the thing I don't get about Lana Del Rey is she started as this dance pop star, this budding dance pop star, and she really pulled that sound off pretty well. You know, we reviewed Born to Die, and while there were a lot of misses on that album, there were... Sorry, not misses as in like newlywed misses.
The joke won't die.
Terrible joke. But there were a few highlights on that record.
Yeah. And I think that her sound really had a lot of intrigue to it.
Yeah.
Which really I think was that sticky factor that got her really famous. Is that I mean it was nothing like anything that was out at the time.
Right.
So.
And then she moved into Ultraviolence, which I actually liked pretty well. That came out a year or two ago, and now we're on Honeymoon, and I feel like it's another kind of iteration from that sound that was present on Ultraviolence, but just even way more slowed down, way more reverbed out. I feel like she's trying to be this kind of like neo-noir indie lounge Frank Sinatra, and for me it just doesn't work. I just don't feel like she has the right persona for that, so it's just not something that I can really get into.
And moreover, I think she just ran out of songwriting ideas. I mean, some of the vocal melodies, I mean, every song she's using the same vocal melodies over and over again, and it really just gets taxing to listen to by the end. You've heard it all before, so why do you want to hear the next song? What's your motivation for continuing to listen to the record?
And I feel like she relies a bit on some gimmicky lyrics.
Oh, she does,
I mean,
sure.
she did that on Ultraviolence too, with like, Effed My Way Up to the Top. But also on this one, she's got like, music to watch boys too. And I'm like, really? Yeah, okay. I'm sure that's intriguing to some people, but
you don't get it.
No, I don't really care for it.
Next up, we have one of the most interesting albums that I've listened to this year, Ryan Adams' cover album, 1989. It's an entire cover album of Taylor Swift's album, 1989.
Right. What an interesting concept, first off. Which, when I first heard that Ryan Adams was doing this, and he announced just very boldly, I'm going to do a cover of Taylor Swift's entire album, 1989, and I'm going to do it in the style of the Smiths. I'm like, what world is this that I'm living in? Like, it seemed really gimmicky. It seemed like a really random pick, but boy, was I proven wrong when I listened to this. You can tell that it's not just some gimmicky thing that Ryan Adams is doing to get attention. Really what he's doing is he's pulling these Taylor Swift songs and he's just reconfiguring them to provide this completely different ethos to the listener. And you can tell that he actually has a deep respect and a deep connection to these songs. Like it just comes out in the way he does them.
There's certainly more melancholy to them.
Definitely.
Right? They're much moodier, and while he cited the Smiths, it sounds more to me like there's a lot of Bruce Springsteen influence in there.
I even heard on his version of Style sounded a bit like early U2 to me.
Sure, for sure. And really, I think that the like what I hear in it is a lot of heartbreak, right?
Oh, absolutely.
He just is going through a divorce with Mandy Moore. And I'm sure that has weighed on his decision to do this. And Taylor Swift's 1989 was impactful on him, and then he wanted to bring new light to it and pay tribute to it. And wow, did he just knock this one out of the park?
And what this project does for me, what this album does, is it proves a point that I've been hammering on for years and years and years, and that's that songwriting and its presentation of that songwriting are two completely independent things. And this is something I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about, but I wish they would. I almost wish more artists would do things like what Ryan Adams is doing here, because you have your basic, lyrics, melody, chord progression, and maybe rhythm. And you can take any one or two of those and mix them up a little bit, completely represent and repackage a song, and it's still technically the same song. But you can bring a whole different light to it, and that's what Ryan Adams is doing here. Now, of course, I think that it really only works within kind of like pop and rock, because that melody is a big factor. I don't think that Ryan Adams could go and do a cover album of like an Aphex Twin or an Opeth record and make it work the same way. It's got to be in generally the same wheelhouse. But
I really want him to try, though.
that would be quite interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But another thing is I think it actually proves that Taylor Swift is a damn good songwriter. I heard Blank Space on the radio recently, and I thought to myself, I was like, damn, this song is actually terrific. Like, I can't deny it. It's a great well-written song. And I will say, I don't think that Taylor Swift has always been a great songwriter. I think back to her early days when I was hearing songs all the time like Teardrops on My Guitar and Love Story, and I just thought that the melody was boring and the lyrics were garbage and the performance wasn't very convincing. And I still feel that way. But hell, you pay someone millions of dollars to do something for a decade, and guess what? What do you know? They're going to get a little bit better at it. And I think that Taylor Swift has actually matured into a decent songwriter, and that's what Ryan Adams is proving here, is that if you like Ryan Adams' version, then at heart, you actually do like the Taylor Swift version. It's just that she's not presenting it in a way that you enjoy.
I would say that whether you like Ryan Adams or Taylor Swift or not, it's probably worth your time to go check out 1989.
Definitely.
Just from the perspective that it brings. It's just give it one listen. I think it's certainly worth that, and it might even be a record that you start coming back to more often.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another new album this month, Pagans in Vegas by Metric. Metric is an electronic indie band, but they're really it's all about the pop hooks. It's
Definitely.
all about the pop songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom and I, one of the first albums we ever reviewed was Metric's Fantasies. It was a request, and man, that one just hooked us. I still come back to Fantasies.
I do
to this
too.
day.
I listened to it last week.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, like I feel like every additional Metric release, in 2012 they released Synthetica, which was pretty good.
It was good, yeah.
And not quite as good as Fantasies. And now we have Pagans in Vegas. I feel like we're always, as listeners, we're always going to be hoping for the next Fantasies, and we're just going to be setting ourselves up for disappointment. Mm-hmm. And Pagans in Vegas is not the next Fantasies. It's also not the next Synthetica either. It's probably a step down from both of those albums. And but that's not to say that this is a bad record. There's a lot of really nice songwriting in here. I would say that they're going even further into the electronic or even dance. There's a lot of dance beats here. They're taking their sound further into that genre or that genre meshing. But that doesn't mean that it was devoid of great hooks and good rhythms and good songwriting. This is one that I don't think is going to be one of the best albums of the year, but I found it to be enjoyable and definitely would recommend to you guys if you're fans of Metric or the indie electronica genre in general.
Another one that came out in September, big metal release, Iron Maiden's Book of Souls. This has been their first release in a while, and it's a double album, very long. It's Iron Maiden's first double album, for having been around like 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. That's pretty neat. But I thought it's a good release. I mean, Iron Maiden is just a solid band. While I don't think they're ever going to recapture the glory days of their 80s albums, they don't need to. They're forging ahead. I feel like this album had a lot of good dynamics on it. Bruce Dickinson's vocals are still holding up pretty well. The one thing I will say is that I feel like maybe they're not quite as nimble and as driving as they were a long time ago. Mostly just there's some tracks on this album that I feel like, I want this to be even just like 5 to 10 beats per minute faster. Just up the tempo a little bit, make it a little bit thrashier, and I would have liked it more, but it's a minor complaint, and this is an album I'll probably come back to again.
Still awesome that we got more music from Iron Maiden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another electronic release that came out in September was Versions by Idjut Boys. I might not be saying that right, but we're gonna roll with it. This is obviously dance electronica, but I classify this more as like house. Reminded me a lot of Nicholas Jar and maybe even a little bit of Fortet and just the softness of the electronic music and the beats themselves. So you don't have these big pounding beats that are just bringing down your house. It's soft, very polite, but at the same time it's all about atmosphere, all about the mood that it's creating.
The subtleties.
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely seemed to be like more of a functional album for me. Like, this is something I would put on and listen to if I had, like just set the mood for a certain event or something like that, but not something that I'm ever going to go, wow, this is brilliant songwriting, brilliant composition, like something like Tim Hecker would do. So it's somewhere in between. Still very, very good and something I would definitely recommend if you're into that electronic beat-based house music.
And we're back to some more metal releases with Slayer's Repentless. Slayer had kind of a tragic lineup change with the death of Jeff Hanneman, but now they're back with Repentless, and it's a good record. I will say that's really as extreme as I can get with it.
Did they slay it?
They always do. It's what they are. Yeah, it's their namesake. But I still feel like the lyrics get a little bit cheesy at times for me. I'm not as big a fan of their frontman's just vocal style. I don't think that it carries as well as it did with albums like, well, of course, Rain and Blood and some of their earlier stuff. But it was still an enjoyable listen. Probably something I'll come back to.
Cool.
Another one of yesterday's releases was Disclosure's Caracal. That's what they do. They're Caracalacan. Dance duo, and they had an album called Settle come out a couple of years back, which was pretty good. It got a lot of buzz. It had a big hit featuring Sam Smith. What do you know? They brought Sam Smith back on this one for a bit more of that magic. And I mean, it's enjoyable. It's not really my cup of tea. I feel like these guys, they're good at what they do with the dance music, but I just, especially this one, I don't think I'm going to come back to it. I'll probably go back to Settle and, some key tracks from that record.
You'll settle on Settle.
I sure will.
Next up, we have an album from the Wonder Years called No Closer to Heaven. This is a pop-punk band, certainly a pop-punk album that was released. It really reminds me of Taking Back Sunday, but more like Taking Back Sunday never were the best songwriters. They really lived in that pop punk genre and that style of songwriting. The Wonder Years definitely seem to bring a bit more to the table when it comes to songwriting. A little bit darker, a little bit more progressive. Kind of reminded me of like what you would get if, and as a kid, I dreamed of this, if you mixed Taking Back Sunday and Brand New together.
Yeah, it's emo, good classic emo from before emo was a bad word with all kind of stigmas attached to it.
But a lot of progressive songwriting and song structuring. You don't get too much of that ABAB format. When they do use it, they use it really well, so it's very impactful and very catchy. But there's lots of dynamic shifts, very, very big, high-energy choruses, which are, infectious, and just an album that I thought was very, very good and something I'll definitely come back to.
Another release from yesterday, September 25th.
One of the biggest days in music for the year.
Crazy, I know. We had the return of New Order with Music Complete. What an album title, first off. It's like, we're done. Music, it's finished. I don't really know what they're trying to say. But
no need to listen to music ever again.
Right. It's done now. But this is a good album. This is something I'm going to check out more. Obviously, since it just came out yesterday, I haven't gotten to listen to it too much in depth, but right off the bat, I can tell, it's still the modern era of New Order.
Sure.
This is not in any way a throwback to their 80s classics when they first started, but it's good. It reminds me a bit more of, stuff we've heard from the Pet Shop Boys recently, or maybe even that Chemical Brothers album that came out earlier this year. It's got a little bit of that. It's a little bit brighter, but it's still got some of that good classic New Order guitar lines. But what they're also doing is they're bringing in some guest features like LaRue and Iggy Pop are on the album. It mixes things up a bit, but you still have the classic New Order vocals. So it does feel like a new iteration of something very nostalgic and something very classic. But I mean, the songwriting is there. These guys know what they're doing. They're some of the godfathers of it. Next is a collaborative release between Phantogram and Big Boy of Outkast, and that's Big Grams. Oh, where do you think they got the name from?
That's a great title. That's a great name.
Right. It's just an EP, but it also, it's fairly good size for an EP, like 7 tracks or so. It's got one featuring Run the Jewels, which is always a welcome guest in any situation. This is an interesting collaboration to me. I don't feel quite yet like it's the sum of its parts. That's mostly just because I'm a huge Phantogram fan and a huge Big Boy fan.
Right.
But I think that they work really well together. There are moments where you can tell Phantogram really steps back to let Big Boy shine and do his thing. And likewise, there are moments where Big Boy really takes a step back and lets Phantogram be themselves. But it allows Phantogram in their beats and in their instrumentation to be a little bit more hip-hoppy with it rather than just moody and atmospheric. So I hope that these two, groups, entities continue to collaborate together because they can really do some cool stuff. And I mean, the talent is undeniable.
Right.
This is something I'll definitely give a few more listens to before I really settle on a decision about it. But I mean, just at its heart, who's working on it should make you want to listen to this album.
Next up, we have the newest release from Mac Miller, Good AM, or Go::OD AM. Not really sure how that's supposed to be said, but I read it as Good AM. Whether or not I would think this is a good morning album, that's a whole nother story. Overall, I think this is a solid modern hip hop record. Lots of hints of R&B in there. Lots of focus on production. That very kind of moody, kind of blue, almost underwater production at times. And the variety of the songwriting or in the song structures themselves. There's a few tracks that are more of the club banger tracks. And some of them are just clearly better than others. But while some tracks are great and others falter, I still think overall this is a very decent album. Mac Miller, what he brings to the table as an artist, I think he has a lot to say, and I think that his lyrics are interesting enough to keep me interested, so it's definitely an artist and an album that I will be coming back to. We also had a release from Motion City Soundtrack this month called Panic Stations. It sounds a lot like Motion City. This band really knows how to do very little to remain interesting. I've never been a fan of this band. We had it on our list to listen to Panic Stations, and I gotta say, these guys just shit the bed again. I really just don't find this Panic Stations to be an album that's at all intriguing. I think their songwriting is really crappy and just not very interesting and very structured to the point that you can predict what the next song is going to sound like before you even hear it. So what's the point of even listening to it? I'm not a Motion City fan, so there is definitely bias there. I'll admit to that. If you are, it's maybe a much better record than what I'm giving it credit for, but I would not ever recommend any Motion City, and this album is definitely in that category.
Next is Blackalicious with Imani, Volume 1. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Just give it a shot. We're from Iowa.
Right. That's our excuse. It always works. Blackalicious is a hip-hop group. Just really top-notch stuff. I mean, if you haven't checked these guys out before, check them out. Please do yourself a favor. I feel like this album is right up there, right on par with the kind of quality that they've set forth in the past. If you're a fan of kind of, like 90s hip hop along the lines of The Roots and A Tribe Called Quest, just very bouncy, very socially minded and actually interesting hip hop, definitely check these guys out.
No club bangers on this record.
No, not about the club bangers. And another album that didn't have any club bangers on it, much to my surprise, was The Dead Weather's Dodge and Burn. The Dead Weather is not a band that Jake and I historically get very excited about.
No, not really.
We were not fans of Whorehound or Sea of Cowards. We were very forthcoming about that. But I got to say, I'm actually starting to turn around on this one, on Dodge and Burn. I was very impressed by this record. The big difference for me is that I feel like on their first two albums, there was this edginess that they were trying to convey that to me always felt very forced and contrived. Somehow, and I can't, this is a terrible criticism because I can't really put my finger exactly on what it is. It just feels much more authentic on this album. I feel like it just came right out of them naturally. The sound is very fluid. The production is really sharp, fits the style of the songwriting and the performances really well. There's a track on there called $3 Hat that I listened to, and I feel like I tripped, fell, and woke up in a Beastie Boys song. I mean, for God's sakes, but somehow it works.
Were you wearing a $3 hat?
I was not. I would have been pretty freaked out.
Another release that came out on September 25th was the latest album from indie rock band, but really just, modern progressive rock band, Silversun Pickups, Better Nature. Tom and I are huge Silversun Pickups fans, have been for years since they came out with their debut album Carnivus, and then 2009 they came out with Swoon, which we reviewed when we were very, very young and starting Velocities in music, and had a big debate about that. And then in 2013 they came out with a bit of a shift in sound with Neck of the Woods, a bit more move towards incorporating electronic elements into their music. And that certainly carried forward to Better Nature.
Definitely. It's probably the most dominating factor on this record, in fact, which, I didn't mind it on Neck of the Woods because the songwriting was still really good, and I feel like the production was there those elements were there to supplement the rest of what the band had already established as kind of their core sound and what their strength was. But I feel like on Better Nature, that gets a little bit off balance. I feel like it takes over the sound a bit too much, and the things that really made Silversun Pickups great, which was the energy in the guitar, the energy in Brian Aubert's vocals, they're just not quite there anymore. That intensity gets drowned out, the vocals get buried in the mix, and it just felt a little bit too poppy for me.
And what intensity is there, just from the nature of how they write their songs, it's completely displaced by just the happy-go-luckiness of the electronic melodies that they're trying to mix in, and it just doesn't work. It clashes terribly, and something that like, it's very clear that there's tracks on here that are still good. Don't get us wrong, but there's a number of tracks on this record that is just like, what are these guys doing? This sounds terrible. Maybe we'll warm up to this one, given a few more listens. I'm certainly, just out of respect for the band, going to give this record more listens, but on first listen, because I've given this, it's only been out for a day or two now, I'm not really that impressed.
No, me neither.
So that wraps up our summary of all the albums that came out in September 2015. Probably half of them on September 25th, 2015. For whatever reason, unbeknownst to us, that was a huge music release day. If you guys have any information on why on Friday, September 25th, that there was such a big day for music, besides the only thing we can think of is the day that Apple Music released all their products, so it might have some correlation to that. But nothing that, no hard facts. It's just speculation. This is a new format for us, and something that we're wondering if we want to keep doing in the future. If you guys like this format of summarizing what came out over the past month in podcast form and getting our thoughts on it, leave us a comment and give us suggestions on what we can do to improve. If you guys want to see this again, if there's any albums that we missed, we'd love to hear your thoughts on those. Really, the purpose of us doing this isn't to make this comprehensive list and go through every album that came out this month. The purpose is to highlight the albums that we thought were worth recommending, and some we thought were worth not checking out at all, like Motion City Soundtrack. But if you guys have suggestions, the whole point of this is to create a music dialogue, so we have a resource together where we can go and find new music and talk about it, because that's the whole point of what Velocities in Music is shooting for. So, that being said, please go out and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening device, and check out our website at www.velocitiesinmusic.com. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are Velocities in Music, moving music dialogue forward.